Oh, yeah. What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 29 of the Sailor Jerry podcast. My name is Matt Cothran, and I am still your host. It is February 3rd, 2022, and Sailor Jerry Spiced Rum is still made the old school way. 92 proof, bold and smooth as hell. I hope everybody out there is doing good. I hope everybody out there is feeling fine. I'm going to keep the monologue short and sweet this week because we got a monster episode ahead for you guys. And whenever that's the case, it's always best to just dive right in. So without further ado, it's time for episode 29. Jay Weinberg has music in his blood. In this episode, we sit down with the Slipknot stickman to talk about his incredible life in rhythm. From growing up as the son of drumming icon Max Weinberg, to filling in for his dad and going on tour with Bruce Springsteen and the legendary E Street Band. Jay also takes us behind the Slipknot mask and opens up about the radical realities of being the drummer in one of the sickest metal bands on the planet. So put your mask on, throw on some coveralls, pour yourself some Sailor Jerry, and let's go. Yo, what up, Jay? How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good, brother. I'm good. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you great. You can hear me?
Yeah. I got you, man. I got you, man. Thanks for being on the Sailor Jerry podcast. You are officially our first drummer on the podcast.
All right. Oh, wow. That's a big honor, man. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. I actually I did an interview last week, I think it was, and they were asking me like if I was going to put a band together of all the guests, like what would I do? And I was kind of going through everyone, and I was like, holy shit, man, I don't got a drummer. I got to get a drummer.
Now you got a drummer. All right. Love that.
Right on, man. So, big start to the year for Slipknot. You guys just announced the Knotfest Roadshow continues this year. Yeah. You got Ginger, and in this moment opening up the first leg, Cypress Hill, which is awesome, and the Horror opening up the second leg, going over to Germany, doing Europe. What's the vibe in the band right now? Is everyone pretty psyched to hopefully be getting back to work?
It's awesome, man. I mean, it was a real breath of fresh air to finally get back to playing shows after everything, the whole world abruptly stopped. So that was an incredible feeling to just get back out and resume what we do, what we love doing. And so the fact that we were able to get out this fall and play like 2 months of shows was amazing. And looking forward from there, it was kind of just gauging how we were able to accomplish that in a really unpredictable world, and it took a lot of hard work on everybody's part. But it was great. The fact that we were able to do that like on our own terms was awesome. So going further and being like, okay, how can we keep this, going, keep this energy going? All this last year, we've been really active in the studio too, making a new album. So trying to bring these things together and keep out there playing shows like we love doing. And while simultaneously, working on our own thing, in isolation till we're ready to share all that stuff. It's really exciting. There's a lot of stuff to be done when you're really forced to just be, not be on tour and not be out there doing our thing. So the fact that now we kind of, are able to do this sort of stuff, we're really looking forward to these Knotfest Roadshow. Both legs, are going to be incredible. And like you said, we've got Europe after that. So it's a very exciting stuff ahead for us.
That's awesome, man. And yeah, it's always super cool when you can come together as a unit creatively, like a lot of bands have had to do over the last couple of years, and pivot and just kind of transfer all that road energy into the studio, and just crank some stuff out. You've done a couple cool things, recently that I wanted to ask you about before we travel back in time. The first thing is the Jam with Jay thing, because I think
Yeah.
I think that's fucking awesome. It's basically where you recorded some audio and video of some Slipknot tracks that people can download and just jam along with, whether it's vocals, bass, guitar, anything and everything. Whose idea was that, and how did it come about?
That's a great question. As far as whose idea it is, oh, forgive me. I hate that I don't know this guy's name, but he's out there somewhere. I had posted a while ago when we had a version of our Outside the Nine kind of app. It's kind of like a expanded little Slipknot world where you kind of go down these portals and stuff. So back when we had this kind of format, I was giving, I would take videos on tours, like, drum cams and stuff, and tried to make some interesting pieces that just show a little bit different of an angle, literally, than people can normally get from our shows. And so then I wanted, when we were making our last album, We Are Not Your Kind, I did the same thing in the studio and just had some cameras going in the studio. And when we're in the studio, I'm in isolation with my drums, so you can't even hear anything else. And some really clever guy with a bass guitar took that video and was like, I know this song. I know how to play this song. I'm going to play along, on my bass to this with Jay with this song. And forgive me, whoever you are out there, because you're a genius. And I was like, that's a really cool idea. So, because he took this solo drum thing and made this I believe it was at the beginning of COVID happening and people getting used to doing, or being forced to do these like digital collaborations. And, if you want to, it broke open this really interesting sandbox for people who wanted to jam with each other, but now we can't because we're going to give each other COVID, so finding this interesting way to, break all geography down, and it doesn't even matter. This kid could be in, another country, another continent. It doesn't matter. We can still jam, really.
Yeah.
And so taking that kind of a step further, and I was like, okay, I want to do a series where that actually is the intent, where I'm actually going to record, myself playing just my contribution into this, just my drums. I'm going to hum along the song in my head, which is what I usually do when we're on tour and I'm just kind of like warming up for our show. I'll just hum a song in my head and get ready for our show. So I basically did that and, found a cool warehouse to do it in. And I have some friends that have lighting rigs and stuff. And it was like, oh, this could be a lot of fun. So we did that like a year ago, and so it's now just been about what was the right timing as far as just like doing something like this Jam with Jay thing. And I it's cool because I saw people who, became interested in it. Like at first it was like, what is this? Like, it's just you playing your drums in this room and there's nothing else. Like, what do I do? But the more and more people started getting their hands dirty, I saw more and more people doing these like really interesting things, and it's ongoing. We've done 2 rounds of it so far. Round 1 was a song called Nero Forte, and round 2 was Solway Firth from our last record. And so we've got round 3 coming up soon, and it's really cool to just see more and more people kind of grasp the idea and pull in their friends, and it's bringing people together in this really interesting way. I've seen like digital collaborations happening where it's like, 4 different people who aren't in the same room doing that as well. And I also took kind of inspiration from a great group of people who are doing some awesome stuff called 2 Minutes to Late Night. Yeah. So those are good friends of mine, and they asked me if I would do, originally, I think the first one I did was Candy's Room by Bruce and the E Street Band. Basically, hey, would you want to do like a metaled up version of a Bruce song? And so we did that, and that was kind of also that like by proxy digital collaboration thing where we all put in our contribution, and then you just sync them all up, and it's one big thing. So that was kind of a loose idea of what I wanted to do, and just putting it out there and seeing how people would react. It's a fun thing to be able to jam with people who you might not be able to get the opportunity to jam with. And I find that the Slipknot and Knotfest community is, it's so rich and vibrant of people with great talent, great energy, and the fact that we can do something like this together, I think is really cool.
Yeah, man, I agree. And it looks awesome and it sounds killer. I mean, the drumming obviously is just unbelievable, but dude, when I saw that, I got so hyped up. I was like, oh, this is so dope. It's such a cool idea. And that, dude, it's so funny where like the world is now. Cause I remember this is probably like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, there was like this, like Time Warner cable, like internet commercial. And it was like public access. And it was like this horrible commercial, basically like these, these kind of like weekend warrior, like musician guys, like jamming in a band, like having band practice, like online, it was like, oh, check out what you can do with Time Warner's new cable, whatever. And it was like this really bad, this kind of like, I don't know, rock and roll, just real bad commercial. And I remember like legitimately laughing at it, going like, oh my God, like that's so horrible. I hope that never happens. I hope that never happens. And now, with where we're at now, it is happening, but thank God it's so much cooler than that fucking commercial. I mean, it's like, cause it's crazy, dude. We do the same thing with Bronx. We're not yet to the point where we're jamming together, online, but it's like, I mean, dude, it's just the way the world is right now. And it's all you got. So you might as well make it cool as shit. And from a fan perspective, to be able to jam with you and play Slipknot songs, I mean, that's fucking incredible, man. It's a really, really cool idea.
It's a lot. Thanks, man. No, I'm really psyched on it. And to me, it's all about like the tools that, that we're talking about here, that we're all kind of becoming, if none of us were well versed in how to digitally collaborate and stuff like that before being locked down with COVID, certainly the last 2 years has made everybody kind of aware of the power of that tool. So, like all things, you can use something with great power for good or for evil. And so hopefully this falls into the, we're using the internet as a tool for good in this case.
100% a tool for good. And shout out to 2 Minutes to Late Night as well. They're doing super cool creative collaborations over there. I was gonna do a Rocks Off version at one point with them, but Bronx schedule was hectic and it didn't work out. But
I got my dad to do a Misfit song.
Are you serious?
Yeah. They did Earth AD. I was like, hey, I introduced them to him, and I was like, you should do like a Misfit song or something. I bet that would be really cool. And I got him to do that. That was pretty fun.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. All right. Speaking of your dad, then let's jump into it. Cause I'm sure you talk about this all the time. So my apologies, but there's a lot of people, who listen to the podcast that might not be aware of your musical lineage. Your dad, Max Weinberg, drummer for the East Street Band, Bruce Springsteen, also the Max Weinberg 7 on Conan O'Brien, which are two, obviously huge moments in his life. What was that? I mean, I know what it was like. It was probably fucking awesome, but can you put into perspective a little bit what it was like growing up in that environment?
Sure. I did have a very musical upbringing, but that wasn't necessarily on the part of, in the context of Bruce and the East Street Band. Really, because they had broken up in 1988. I was born in 1990, and they got back together in 1999. So I wasn't really familiar with that element of my dad's life. It wasn't really something that was discussed. It wasn't really something that came up really until they got back together and they had this reunion tour. And all of a sudden I'm like going to these shows and I'm like, what is happening? Who are these people? and this and that. And, I was familiar with the people involved, like Bruce, Steve, Gary, Danny, Clarence, all these guys, Roy. But I never knew about the context of the band or that they were a big band or anything like that. It was very foreign to me. And I knew in a general sense about the TV show because they started that in about, I think, 1993. So I probably was starting to put, together things of like who these people are around me and stuff, but I had no real context clues. I knew these were things, but, I wasn't staying up at 12:30 and watching late night, when I was a kid. So I had this like proximity to it, but I didn't really understand it all that much until I started developing my own sense of, learning about bands and learning these records that my parents had been playing for me. The Beatles, the Stones, the band, Bob Dylan, the Who, stuff like that. Digging into whatever research I could at like, 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old. Like my favorite band was the Who when I was 5. Quadrophenia was all I listened to.
Hell yeah.
So they passed down a lot of music to me, but when the E Street Band got back together and they started doing the reunion tour, and then they did their first record after that, The Rising, which was really big in like 2003. That's when I really started to get the whole bigger picture of all that was. Because to me, it was just like, this is my family and here's my dad bringing me to these things. And I'm just kind of along for the ride. What was a really cool moment that I then kind of made me realize how like my interests were in line with, that part of my dad's life and whatever, was when bands that I was finding out about, punk bands and whatever, they were coming on to the Conan show, and I would be able to see who was like coming on the show that month or something and be like, oh, Dad, I want to come in, I want to come up and see the Used when I come up on, I would take the train. When I was like 12 years old, I grew up in New Jersey. I see you're wearing an Asbury Park Football Club shirt.
That's
so I grew
right.
up maybe like 30 minutes away from Asbury Park. And I would take the train up to the city, and I'd hang out. I'd go to like St. Mark's Place, where I found a lot of, punk rock kind of shops and whatnot. And then I'd bounce up to the studio where they would do the Conan show, and I'd go see, a band that I was a fan of. They'd be playing on the show, and then they'd play at like CBGB's or Irving Plaza or Roseland Ballroom or Webster Hall that night. And I would do that like, once a week or a couple times a week or whatever. I just do my homework on the train and meet my dad at work, and we'd go to these shows. And funny enough, like, so that's how I've made some really long lasting friendships. Like when I went to go see the Used back in like 2001 or 2, Brandon Steinecker, one of the founding members and drummer, he now plays in Rancid, and we've been really, really great friends for like well over half my life, since I was 12 years old or so. So moments like that were really formative for my development in like, not only just having a respect for how that intersected with like, it made me kind of look at my dad with like a lot of respect with his proximity and how these guys were coming to the Conan show and being like, oh my God, you're, such and such guy from this band and the TV show. And I started to really make these things click in my head that it's like, this isn't just like, my dad and his band or whatever. It's like, damn, this, what he's been up to has really had a profound effect on people that I look up to independently of all that. And so that was a really cool thing for me to, kind of come to grips with and understand. And then, I would go out on tour with them, just as a family member and taking in the world and stuff. And through that relationship of me being around these guys and stuff, that is what inevitably ultimately led to when there was a scheduling conflict of my dad having the Tonight Show, having to be there for the beginning of the Tonight Show and the start of a Bruce tour, having to be in 2 places at once. It was because of that 10 years of, being on the side of the stage, absorbing everything. Just like that was that was such a huge education for me, even though I didn't know I was like studying for something. It ended up being what I needed to then cross the threshold of like, hey, would you want to play drums for us? And then that becoming a reality was like a whole other thing.
Dude, that's insane, dude. That's so wild. Cause I mean, it's such a unique atmosphere to grow up in with the TV show, because it's like like you're saying, dude. And that, I'm a little bit older than you. I was born in 79. So when that first wave of Conan hit, it was so rad, dude. There was like nothing like it that was happening. He had the coolest musical guests. It was the raddest band. And it was like the funniest show by a fucking mile, dude. It was like, I loved Letterman, but Conan was just so rad. And I can imagine, and it's so weird too, because when bands go to like play on TV, that's a pretty nerve-wracking experience, And so you see that super unique environment of like being able to watch them play, and a lot of times probably making their television debut or something like that. It's so cool, man. It must have been such a trip.
Well, I'll take that one step further, connecting that to today, a band making their television debut like Slipknot back in 2000, I think it was their first time on a, major television show. And my dad is watching bands every night, and every now and then he, passed down like, oh, this band was really cool. I think you might dig them. But they came on the show promoting their first record, and he was like, this is insane. My kid's gonna love this. And he met the guys, backstage at the TV show. And they were like, hey, if you ever want to come to a show, you bring your family, whatever, like, we'd love to have you guys. And he took them up on it and was like, yeah, we'd love to come to a show. So then like a couple months later, he brought our whole family. We went to Ozfest to see them before the Iowa record had come out. And that's where I had struck up this friendship as, I was 10 years old. And that's where we had first met. And it's very crazy wormholes. We talk about it often. Those things that you really can't, you can't conceive of that being reality, but it is.
Yeah, it's just interwoven, man. It's interwoven in the fabric. That's crazy. And then, I do want to say shout out to Brandon as well, from Rancid and the Used, because we just finished up the tour with them last year. Right. And we did early on, Bronx did a tour with the Used in like 2003 or 4 or something like that. And I think it was the In Love and Death tour kind of right before he split. And then, I didn't really know him really at all then, but we got to connect on the Rancid tour, and he's an awesome dude and a great drummer, man.
He's the drummer that made me want to start playing drums, like that's where the light switch, in my head went off. Because music wasn't really something that I was drawn to play. I was very into it, but it wasn't something that spoke to me to, pick up an instrument necessarily. I did a little bit, like I played guitar when I was 9, and then like would go take lessons, but lessons were like school, and I didn't want to go to school after school. Yeah. And so I came to it kind of late, but it was like watching Brandon at Irving Plaza when I was 12 years old made a huge impact on me. And that's what like made me want to be like, I want to do that. Whatever that is, I want to do that. And we're, best friends to this day.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I was going to ask you if there was ever that kind of like moment, since you grew up in such a musical household, you grew up around it, if it was something that, when it came time to playing an instrument, picking up drumsticks, learning how to play guitar, whatever, if it was something that happened kind of naturally, or if it was like almost begrudgingly, or if there was a moment where you wanted nothing to do with music, you thought, or you know what I mean? Like, was there ever a moment in your life when you were like, this is great and all, but I don't want to do this when I grow up. Like, I want to do something different.
No, it was, it came to me in, I feel like late in grade school or something. When I was 9 years old, I started playing ice hockey, and I was a goalie.
Nice.
And that was my passion. That was my everything. And I didn't really make time in my life for anything else. It was everything hockey all the time. And, when I was in my sophomore year in high school, I had started a band. Like I picked up the sticks, because I realized like we had a drum set at home. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to, just kind of mess around on this. And I would kind of monkey see, monkey do what I would watch, drummers like Brandon or my dad, and with guys that I had watched and been like, oh, I want to try that. That looks fun. But I was always, it was such an afterthought after hockey was just, so much of my life. But it came time in my sophomore year, I had this band excuse me, that I was like kind of half-assing. I had the hockey that I was kind of half-assing because I was starting to get more interested in music. And it would get to the point where I was like showing up to play a hockey game, and I'd be more concerned about like listening to, an album on my headphones and like practicing drums on my pads. And I was like, something's not right here. Like I'm more invested in this music that's starting to really call my attention, and I'm less invested in hockey. And it took that moment where I was like, all right, I'm going to put hockey aside. I'm not going to, try to half-ass these two things. I'm going to just throw all myself into playing music because that's what's calling me right now. And I just became, the guy that became like super, super focused on that in high school. And any off period or lunch period I was in our graphics, room making flyers and stuff and booking shows and all that, all the stuff that we all do. And that just became the whole process of it became so enamoring for me. And just dedicating my life. Like I found this calling that I just wanted to find out more about it, do more, play more shows, play with more people, do all that I can. And then I went to college and my high school band broke up because we all went to different schools. And then that was the moment when it was like 2 months into being at college that Bruce asked if I would want to play for them. And it was about like 3 years after I had started playing drums. Like I said, like it was all I did. So I kind of put myself on this like vertical learning curve, trying to play along and do my best playing along to like Slayer records and Metallica records and whatnot. So by the time I was 17 when I first played with them. But then Bruce asked when I was 18 if I would want to do this as a tour, and if I'd be able to. And so I didn't know, so we just kind of, my hat's off to him and all of them for entrusting me with that. And, just kind of like I had before, just throwing myself completely in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, drums and music overall, it wasn't like a thing. It definitely wasn't a thing I was turned off to at an early age. Like it was something that kind of was a slow burn.
Yeah.
Up until realizing at 14, 15 years old that I was like, it's inescapable. I was hooked and I wanted to throw my life, into being a musician. And, that's 16 years ago, whatever that is. That's kind of how I was drawn to the instrument and everything else that's more, that's even more global, the community and how I felt like I found like a purpose and a tribe around myself. That really meant a lot to me.
That's cool, man. Do you think that your parents kind of knew that it was something they shouldn't try to like force, and it was like this, you're going to learn how to do whatever you want to do with your life. And that's all good, because I think that's such a cool thing, because it would be hard to kind of like avoid that as a parent, I think. But, it seems like you had a pretty amazing situation growing up and pretty cool parents that understood to just let you be you. And if you want to end up becoming a drummer, musician, it'll happen,
Well, for them, they didn't exactly have an easy out where my dad couldn't tell me you're not growing up to be a drummer. It's never gonna, it'll never work out for you. It'd be completely hypocritical. So I didn't really have parents that could turn me away from pursuing a lifelong dedication to music. That wasn't in the cards for them. So no, all that, and they spurred me on in the ways that they saw fit, which was really just letting me find my own passions, whether that was hockey. Like they never forced music on me, and hockey found me naturally. And if they were like, yeah, if that's your thing, go do it. And then when I made that sharp left turn to be like, no, drums is like, that's my thing, they're like, great, we'll be encouraging of that too. And to this day, like, my mom was she was very skeptical about the band Slipknot when I was a kid, and I'd hear these songs coming from my bedroom and be like, what is he up to in there? But nowadays she's, in the pit throwing elbows and stuff, and she knows every word. So it's very funny how the way, things evolve and develop like that.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that's super cool. Did you ever get into any goalie fights in your hockey days?
It's funny you say that because like I have a clear memory of one when I was like, 12, 13 maybe. Where I was in like a scrum and I'm covering the puck and a guy comes up and tries to whack the puck out of my glove. And I just took my blocker. It's, huge, you can do some damage with that thing. And I just like clocked him in the head. And we ended up talking after the game and he became like my best friend. That was how, back when you're like kids, you start out, you get in like a hockey scrap. And then I think it was like the next day or something, we wanted to make peace. And I was like, come over and we'll play hockey in the street and stuff. And we became like best friends. So I think that's really the only kind of like scrap I was in. Nothing that's like, a legendary, going toe to toe and have refs. I think I probably would have gotten, thrown out of my little house league or something that I was playing in. But I was competitive for sure, but only remember that one, and it turned into a great friendship. So
that's great. Yeah, man. I got a lot of love for hockey, and I got a lot of friends who played, and they're all super like just funny, cool dudes. And it's like at some point, it's either they're pulling the shirt over somebody and punching them in the face at some point in their life. It's pretty amazing. But going back to playing with Bruce, did
Sure.
you before you hit the stage to play your first full set, was there any, like, did you at one point, did you maybe jump behind the kit while your dad was playing and play a song? Or was it really just like, you're going to play the full set, you're going in, like that's how it happened?
Well, yeah. So it was the other way. That would have been sadistic. But no, it was, it was very natural, like anything that they do, it really happened in this organic kind of family, homegrown kind of way.
Yeah.
Where I was the last child of the band members to get up on stage and play with them. My sister had actually played with them when she was like 12. She played keyboards at Madison Square Garden, and I was in awe of that. It was incredible. But for me, I was so nervous being a drummer and a new drummer at that. I'd only been playing for 3 years or something. For me, if I'm playing on stage with them, like and I'm messing up, you can't just pull me down in the mix and kind of hide me. It's very apparent if I'd be messing up in front of tens of thousands of people. So they, my dad wanted me to play with them at soundcheck one day, and so I did. I learned the song "Born to Run," played it with them at soundcheck. Felt awesome to play in a giant, in giant stadium. To nobody, but it just felt incredible to play on drums on that stage. It was incredible. It was amazing. And then Bruce was like, that felt great. Why don't you play that during the show? And so to then cross that threshold, my stomach was in knots. I was so nervous. And, that's a song that they saved till later in their set, which is like 4 hours long. So I was waiting for 4 hours through this show, just being like, oh my God, they're going to have me do this. I'm so nervous, but I kind of just put that aside and did it and was like, I never have to do that ever again. That was my moment, and it was super exciting. And that's how I thought about it. Then a couple months later was when they figured out that they would have this scheduling conflict.
Yeah.
Tonight Show and this tour coming up. And they were like, okay, we got to figure out how to, how to make this happen. And so they were like, well, Jay played that one song. Do you think he could learn like hundreds of others? And that's how we, they introduced me at the beginning of this tour, where I'd come up and play, a song or two in the encore, and then I'd play the whole encore, and then I'd play, 10 songs or something like that.
Yeah.
And they would ease me into it to the point where I was playing the majority of the show and my dad would play the encore or whatever. And then he had to go to Burbank and do the start of the Tonight Show. And then I was like, all right, you're on your own. This is it. And we had our first show together in Albany, I think. And so nervous because I hadn't played a show start to finish. And whenever you haven't done something like that, and it's a completely new frontier.
Yeah.
Such an exciting, that whole group of emotions that, that's happening was hitting me all at once. But, you just got to kind of pull yourself up and rise to that occasion, and not to let down these people who are like my family, and who are entrusting this major position of this music with me. I wanted to show them that I was taking it really serious. And so, to play my first show, 30 something songs, 3.5 hours or whatever it was a daunting task. But I didn't have the perspective of like now I look at, if like I would look at an 18-year-old embarking on doing that and be like, that's totally insane. But to me, it didn't feel like this was out of the ordinary. It didn't feel like this was whatever. It just felt like this thing that I now had to do. I have to make this happen. Looking back on that now and being like, I was 18 when you guys, like, what were you thinking? What were you thinking of, like, entrusting me with this? But to the credit of everybody involved, we made it happen. And they were, that was my rock and roll education, where Bruce was handing me a list of like 5 songs to learn every day, and we would sound check 2 or 3 of them and then probably throw one in at during the show. That was just like hitting the rock and roll book super, super, super hard. And not that I knew that would be preparing me for anything that came after that, because obviously it was a temporary thing. My dad would come back from the Tonight Show and resume his throne, as it was. But to want to take care of that and do my best in it, the application into that process is something that's completely identical to the way I conduct myself with Slipknot today.
Yeah. And that's so cool, because it's like, I mean, of course, from the outside in, it's 0 to 60, right? I mean, a high school band breaks up, you go to college, you're still playing, you're kind of like you're saying, a little bit in hockey, a little bit of music, and then you get the fucking call, and you've been doing a little bit here, a little bit there, but then the first full show comes. Man, that had to be the craziest feeling.
Totally crazy. And what was crazier after that, so we played in Albany, and then I want to say we played Hershey Park, and then I think my third show, full show, was a headlining show at the arena where where we grew up going to New Jersey Devils games at the Meadowlands. And that was my church, like that was where so many memorable moments in my life I spent, as a young kid there, and watching them play. I'd seen them play there many, many times. And there were 2 shows. I was going to play the first one, and then the second one was like on a weekend, so where they weren't taping the Conan show, so my dad could fly in and play that show. So we kind of tag teamed this weekend of shows, and that was insane because I had just graduated high school. I've got all these people, all my peers and people that I went to high school with. They had never known that this was like a part of my life. I have a high school band, but nobody's coming out to see us and whatever. So now all of a sudden I'm doing this thing, and I've got like hundreds of people that I've known throughout my adolescence or whatever. They're all there, in addition to like 20,000 other people. But that was totally insane to come into this building, having worked throughout the year on integrating me into this tour, but now to be playing in this specific building, and the people that were there, it was like such a wild, surreal experience. And we've actually since played there with Slipknot. And so like to take that even further and be like, sometimes it is difficult to often, step back and look at things in the context of like, wow, this is really crazy. But doing it, especially like in certain buildings, it really helps put together that whole like larger picture of like, man, this is really insane. But yeah, man, those first like full shows, and then we went to Europe, and that was my first time playing European festivals ever. Totally wild, and got a real education at 18 years old, what this is all about.
Yeah. That's fucking awesome, man. Was there ever any awkward moments? You ever like hit like a wrong fill or something, or like piss Bruce off or anything?
Dude. Of course. Yeah, definitely. The one that, oh man, this is like, I just get chills. You just like look back on certain moments and you're just like, oh my God, that's such traumatic experience emotionally. There was one time I remember we were going to play those European shows, and Bruce we had a conversation about just, preparing. And I guess in a way, it kind of helped me think about, like, a show in America or New Jersey, for example, is going to be different from a show in Belgium or whatever. Like, these cultures are different. So, preparing, you do your thing, no matter what that thing is, you just kind of go out and do it. But you kind of notice, and through their teaching me, or their 40 plus years of experience, how things are different in different places. So you kind of prepare for things differently. So that is to say, he was like, study all these songs, get ready for this, and I'm going to be throwing a lot at you every day, because during the show he's throwing out songs, just calling out stuff left and right, and we have to move on the fly. The set list is a completely moving, ever-changing thing while you're on stage. And he was like, but he explicitly told me, he was like, don't study the Wild Innocent and E Street Shuffle album. We're not going to play anything off that, because it's just gonna, like, some of the songs are a lot longer and you can just fit in more songs in this space of time. He's like, don't worry about that. I'm like, okay. So I took that at face value. He held up a sign, because people would make these signs that he'd then pull from the audience as of requests, and he'd show everybody in the band, like, all right, we're gonna jump into this one. And I had to do that with a bunch of songs that I had never heard of before, like covers that they had played back in the 60s, but I was very unfamiliar with them. And I would just kind of have to make it up on the spot. And I knew that when he pulled up a song that he knows I don't know, he's not going to set me up for failure. And, whatever. He's going to ease me into this experience of playing a song I've never heard of before in front of 60,000, Swedes. And it's going to be fine. And he's really like the only kind of person that can do something like that. It's kind of incredible. But he held up a sign that somebody had made for the E Street Shuffle. And while I'm like waiting to start this next song, I'm going like, oh my God. I on purpose was focusing on other stuff and not that. I know it's a super kind of, not proggy, but it's got a lot of, like, it's a specific song. I can't fake the funk with that.
Yeah.
So in front of like 70,000 people, he held up that sign to me, and I had to be like, no, I don't know it. I don't know it. And the boo that I got from like 70,000 strangers at 18 years old was something that I would never forget.
Man.
But it's like, what you want me to ruin this thing by like trying to figure it out? I'm like, I don't know it. I gotta just, all my cards on the table. I don't know it. So stuff like that will, of course, be like, forever haunt me. But it also taught me this lesson of, like, on the biggest scale you could ever imagine, it's just music. It's just rock and roll,
Hell yeah.
And that taught me that it's like, it's not the end of the world. We'll play another song. It's all good. And that's kind of what Bruce had communicated to me in that moment of, like, I think I saw it, the wave of realization, happen, where he's like, right, I told you not to even pay attention to those songs. We'll play another song. And then he picked out another sign, and we played that song. So it was so traumatic, but also very enlightening as to, it's punk rock, it's rock and roll. It's all, it's not meant to be perfect. There's meant to be moments like that it's just like, hey, you can just do your best, but you got to be honest in those moments. I was like, I can't fake this. And yeah, so growing moments, right? You take that.
Yeah, well, and it's way better to be booed for not playing a song than that, like, awkward kind of weird murmuring going on in the crowd when you're like butchering the song.
Yeah, like, what the fuck is this guy's problem? Yeah. So we dodged a bullet there, but what an amazing learning experience. All you can do is learn. All you can do in a moment like that is just try to absorb as much as you can, and then going from there, figure out how I can apply that to the rest of my life.
Right on, man. So some of your, let's talk about some of your direct musical influences here. I know you mentioned the Used earlier. I know you've been around punk, hardcore, heavy music, pretty much your whole life. Around, like what were your kind of main influences musically speaking around that time, like 2010, 11, 12? What were you kind of rocking?
Sure. So, I think having these like touchstones of like big stadium rock and roll, that was like a familiar thing to me. But also in my backyard, I had a great little, very tight knit underground little music scene in New Jersey. And that was really important to me, like seeing the bands that came out of the high school that was down the road. Like there was the high school, that was like my high school's rival school. A lot of great bands came from that school, and actually bands that went on to do some awesome things and tour a lot and travel the world and whatever. But they were like hometown heroes to us. And so I would be going to the Internet Cafe. Was a very popular venue in the town, near me. And I'd be going to, there's literally people like doing homework on laptops and stuff. And there's a hardcore show happening, in the cafe. Stuff like that was like really important to me, and seeing how you could put on shows at a VFW hall or a Knights of Columbus and do it on this like local scale. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have this, resume of professional things. You can just be a person who's wanting to dabble in that, yourself. And so I found these people around me, and that meant a lot to me. And through that, I found other bands that were prominent in New Jersey: Bouncing Souls, Thursday, Lifetime, so I got to learning about these people who like come from this area and have carved out a really amazing community and culture with all this. And so, I'd be going down to Asbury Park to, the Stone Pony, or like the first show I ever played with my high school band was at the Saint in Asbury Park. And those were really huge for me. So I learned that, punk and hardcore and metal, and also this is, sort of also being informed by the metal bands that I was getting into at the time, Slipknot being, of course, one of them. And seeing that I really resonated with this type of music, but wanted to, all I could do was take a punk rock approach of like playing this music I love, but trying to book my own stuff and do things my own way, have shows at my house and whatever, and try to play at the high school and, all that stuff. So my influences then definitely stemmed from that tree that kind of branches out, and you start to, I start to dig into bands' thanks lists and their CD booklets. And I'm like, okay, so this band, they're going out on tour with, so-and-so. And so, let's take one of those easy, like The Used. I would see that they're kind of in this community with like Thursday and Coheed and Cambria and Thrice and stuff like that. So, okay, I'm going to go to the Thursday, Thrice and Coheed and Cambria show. And that's at the Roseland Ballroom. So who am I going to go see the, Roseland Ballroom after that? And, go see Slipknot and, take that further. Oh, they're on tour with Slayer. Who's Slayer bringing out on tour? Lamb of God and Mastodon. Who's Mastodon going out on tour with? Converge in the Bronx and all that kind of stuff, where I'm like, I'm so, it just keeps going and going and going. And so that's where all that stuff started to really show me like, oh my God, this goes forever, and at that time as well, go maybe a little bit earlier, like 2003, my first Warped Tour experience, seeing how all that sensory overload stuff really started to make sense as this like collage of just intensity and music and art and stuff. So that really informed those bands at those particular times, like AFI in 2003. It was like such a specific thing for the people that fell in love with that.
Big time.
Yeah, it was like really, really meaningful. And growing up and then finding out what bands influenced those bands, and you start to draw that lineage. That's where I fell in love with like Neurosis and stuff like that has stayed with me in this like very much deeper way, where you're like, these are bands that have totally carved something out of nothing, and they found their own way. They did it their own style, their own way. And so that started, if you're talking about the years of like 2010 through 2012, and excuse me, I'm playing with bands, we're touring and stuff, that starts to speak to me on this deeper level of where I'm kind of finding myself within the realm of music and what my passions are.
Yeah.
it really started to be like, you can go deep in this to where you can like channel your soul of who you are through this. So then that started to, I started to understand the significance of Joy Division, Black Flag, Neurosis, all stuff like that comes from, from out of nowhere. It's just completely, it's completely that band's thing. That started really speaking to me a lot, and started making me think about music in a deeper sense, as a like, I guess, a deeper student of trying to pay attention to stuff like that. And that pretty much is kind of how I see music today as well. Like I love finding new things, but what speaks to me the most are when I find a band that isn't doing anything that's like anybody else, that's really carving their own path. And yeah, so, it's not a unique story. I think a lot of people, as they get older and develop their tastes and find their place in the world and what they respond to, what music speaks to them and whatnot, the music you find in those years of your early 20s, late teens, early 20s, excuse me, when you're really starting to put together a real identity of self kind of thing and see yourself a deeper perspective in that kind of music and art. I think those are like really significant years. And it was that way for me for sure. So you talk about, Neurosis, Black Flag, I always, when I'm put on the spot for like, oh man, yeah, what am I into? I always like,
oh, no.
I always forget what I'm into,
but yeah, I know you answered that perfectly, man. And it gets me so excited too, because that's the thing. I think that most music, people like myself, like you, it doesn't, have to be in a band, just someone who just loves music. There is that moment where everyone kind of has that personal like rabbit hole story where you find one record and then it leads to another record, which leads to this show, which leads to the opening bands, which leads to seeing other bands at that club, and it all just becomes this moment of just incredible artistic discovery where you're just you're discovering bands and records and songs that are just shaping like your whole life, and it's such a cool experience. It's why, music is the fucking best, so you're going from Bruce, which is like 2010, 2011. You did the Madball record Empire. You did a little bit of stuff with Against Me. Both of those things just weren't the right fit. And it's like, what happened after that before Slipknot? What were you doing?
Finishing up college
You went back to college?
I went back. Yeah. This is a funny story. I dropped out. So I'll keep it concise because it's kind of like besides the fact, but while doing Bruce, while doing the Bruce tour, I went to my school because I just started college, and like that was important to me. My mom was a teacher, and it was kind of this thing like I wanted to accomplish, like almost for her in a way. So I went to school in Hoboken, New Jersey, and it's right outside New York, which is like fantastic for me because I wanted to be in New York every day, going to shows, going to art galleries, whatever. It was like taking it all in. And that was still such a great moment in my life to do that. But then I got to get asked to play with Bruce like 2 months into starting college. So I went to them, and I went to a smaller school. Like if I was at a bigger school, they would have been like, get the fuck out of here. We're not letting you go on tour and also do school at the same time. Like that's not how we do things. But so I was at a smaller school where I told them, I was like, hey, I have this opportunity. It's not just like I'm playing with my band in high school. I laid it out for them of like how this kind of happened. I was like, I'd love to pursue my school at the same time as doing this tour. But if you're going to make me pick one, I have to do this tour just because I never know if I'm ever going to get an opportunity like this. And they were like, that sounds cool. And we can make it work. If you can pull it off, we're okay with that. So I would do things where I would, I'd submit stuff online whereas normally I'd be in a classroom or whatever. And they worked with me to do that. So I stayed in school that whole time. And then when it came time when I was in Against Me and we were touring, like, playing a show every night for like 9 months in a row. It's very difficult to balance school at the same time. I remember one time we were driving from, I think we played a show in like El Paso, and we were driving to Anaheim to play at Chain Reaction. And and I was doing an exam. I was doing like a economics exam or something on a BlackBerry, and that drive, you lose phone service like every 5 seconds. And so I go to like submit it, and my internet died out, and the whole thing that I worked like, it was like 4 hours or something, and I lost the whole thing. And I nearly threw my phone out the window of the van, and I got to the parking lot of Chain Reaction. And before we started loading into the show, I dropped out of college because I was like, I can't do this at the same time. I have to focus on one thing. And like I said earlier, it's like I gotta pick the thing that I'm gonna focus on, because I don't want each to have half of my brain or half of my commitment. So I called my my family. I was like, I got to make this decision. I have to put school on hold to do this full time, and they understood. And then I called my school, and they were like, all right, well, if you come back, you just let us know or whatever. So with all that said, in 2013, I went back and finished school, took like an overload of like courses to try to finish it like quickly. During that time, I played with a band from Norway called Kvelertak, which was awesome.
yeah, hell yeah, cool, awesome band.
So fun. Those guys are great friends, and I had never met them before, but their drummer had an arm injury while they were on their first headlining tour in the United States, and they didn't want to stop the tour, so they're kind of trying to figure out what to do. And so I got a phone call of like, hey, can you like meet this band from Norway tomorrow? Can you learn both their records on a flight to a city tomorrow? I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I met these guys, and they become great friends of mine. But doing a lot of stuff, and I started painting. Like that was a new adventure for me, where I found a teacher in Hoboken, where I was going to school, and we start this teacher-student relationship, and I just like fell in love with oil painting. So I started taking up a lot of creative time. And then as I'm finishing up school, it was like I believe it was the day I pressed like submit on my final like term paper or something like that, was when I get a phone call to come out to a city. Won't tell me what it's about, just please come out here, and I think we think you'd be good at this, we think you'd want to do this. And then I go into a room, there's a drum set. All right, you're gonna audition for Slipknot in 20 minutes. And that was that.
What?
Yeah.
That's how it went down, was just like an undisclosed location. Well, you had to just go and audition like that. Of course, that's amazing. And you talk about earlier about bands, music is music. It's all great, but bands that are really doing their own thing are the really special ones. And that's motherfucking Slipknot. So when you find out that's what you're doing, where was your head at?
Man, well, I had to do a little like mental jujitsu about how to figure out how to process that moment. But I had to do some like quick thinking and be like, talk to myself and be like, okay, they brought you out here without telling you what this is. And I don't think it's going to be necessarily the thing. They knew, because of this friendship that we started when I was like 10 years old, they know what the band means to me. They know that I've studied this music inside and out, because they literally watched me grow up. Every time they were, they'd come through town, I'd be at the show, and I'd be a little bit taller and wearing like a Cooler Band t-shirt or something. And they know that I'm studying the music. They see me in the front row screaming all the words, and I know the songs. So when I wouldn't be able to speak for them, but I think their thinking was like, let's get him out here. He knows the stuff. He knows what the band is about. He plays drums. Maybe he'll be able to do this. And if I were to bet, the drummer that they would want in a moment like that is the guy that they could bring across the country without telling him what it's about, tell him to get on the drum set and just do it. Like, I feel like that was kind of the mindset I had to occupy, was like, they just want to see some dude go crazy on the drums, throw himself into it in the spirit of the band. And yeah, if it's not, 100% accurate exactly what I need to be doing, it's more so, can I channel the spirit? Can I channel the energy that I know this band needs and has shown for their entire career.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the thinking I had to do in the space of like a couple seconds, and really just have fun with it. Because I honestly thought in the moment, I was like, you know, if this is just today, you know, because they're gonna be talking to drummers and stuff. I'm like, if this is just today, I'm just gonna enjoy playing these songs that meant so much to me growing up with these guys.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all I'm gonna think about, and just have fun with this moment. What a crazy moment. And then so we, you know, they turn on the amps and we play like 20 something songs. And then it was kind of like a, you know, I'm just like having fun with this. And they're like, all right, you want to start on a new record tomorrow? And that was kind of the turning page of like, yeah, totally, let's do this. And so that was what ended up becoming the Gray Chapter. It kind of did happen like that. Yeah.
Yeah, what a moment, man. That's absolutely incredible. And obviously that's a life-changing moment for you. I mean, you know, now you're in Slipknot. Gray Chapter comes out 2014. You know, was there a lot of pressure in the studio on the first record? You know what I mean? Like, was it what you're jumping into a new band? You know, obviously, you know, the guys, they know you, but you know, studio's kind of a wild animal sometimes. You know, what was that kind of like for you stepping in to that kind of working relationship right away?
Yeah, an incredible amount of pressure. Not necessarily thinking about the band existing in the world and being the Slipknot that we all, you know, love. It was more so the pressure of wanting to deliver on the expectations, hopes, whatever, you know, whatever they might want from me to deliver in this, because it's such a specific thing, and it's such a, you know, when you're coming into a band that has that history, you know, it's got to be all respect, all love for what's, you know, what's being created. Yeah. Respect for what's happened before, but also having to balance that with like, you can't step into this in a timid way. You can't kind of be like, well, what if I, you know, approach this way? What do you guys think of it? Like, it's like, no, you got to go for the throat every day, all day. That's your role. And so having those doors open for me, and they were very helpful in kind of communicating those things, you know, like those intangible ways of describing how they, you know, they have applied themselves to this band and what they need of me to, you know, to apply myself to this band. Because the stuff of playing with Bruce was certainly a challenge and a growing experience. This was that times a million, you know.
Yeah.
And knowing what this band meant to me, knowing what the band means to a lot of people and what it means to these guys, that was, you know, the culmination of the pressure of like, every day I got to wake up and give it everything I've got. It really hasn't changed. You know, that pressure has not changed as far as like, and I'd even take it a step further and say that I probably put more on myself, and, you know, as it relates to our collective effort, knowing what I know now and having, you know, a couple hundred Slipknot shows behind me, knowing what I know now, I think I have even more of a context and like a sharper vision of applying myself 100% every day. And it really hasn't changed. I've just learned more about it. But so, yeah, like we spent a month and a half, Jim, Clown, and myself in a studio where Jim had like a lot of well thought out structures of songs that would become the album. And he would kind of kick me a song a day and be like, what would you do to this? What would you do to this? And, you know, I'm just every day, just hammering it out, giving it my best and really proving to them, because, you know, nothing had been announced, nothing had been, you know, this is like still, we're really feeling each other out.
Yeah.
And seeing if this works, and, you know, hitting it so hard every day, just demoing out these songs to the point where then it's like, okay, these are great demos. Let's actually go and track this record. And so, you know, we were working together doing stuff for about a year before I even played my first show. And which to me now, knowing now how much of our onstage activity, how crucial that is to the Slipknot experience. It's crazy to think that we made music that I didn't have the experience of being on the stage yet.
Yeah.
And so now knowing what that's like, and now we've made 2 records, since, one that's come out and one that hasn't come out yet. Now I take that experience and apply it to what we're creating in isolation, because I can touch on what that feeling is, on stage. I wasn't able to do that for the Gray Chapter. I hadn't played in a mask or coveralls yet. So these are all like right when we played our first song together at a show, a Knotfest show that's being live streamed to the world, which basically to me was like just 3 million people staring at their computers like, let's see if this guy fucks up. But taking that moment, and as soon as we started, that whole year that we had just spent working on this record just all of a sudden clicked to me. And the whole picture of Slipknot really, like, having been an outsider for, at that point, 2001 to 2014, 13 years, I've dreamt of what that reality might be like. And it's a lot of what I would have dreamt it to be like. It's a lot more than what I had dreamt it to be like. But all of a sudden, I'm finding out in real time what that's like. Another, vertical learning curve again. And one of those sink or swim, fight or flight kind of moments where you just have to abandon everything, abandon all your insecurities or your fears or whatever, and just go all the way through it. That was how I learned how to channel that, because it's a difficult concept to grasp as like a young person.
Yeah.
But to do that and then just spend the next 8 years honing that, has been the greatest learning experience of my lifetime. And it's going on into what we currently do. It's like that process, I think, is the most important thing I've learned, is that like it never stops. It only becomes deeper and deeper. And how much more of yourself can you apply into this and go deeper, do that thing, explore more, push yourself more. I feel like I'm definitely not even the drummer I was, 8 years ago, and that's just because of the development of, Slipknot boot camp, for lack of a better phrase.
Well, yeah, man. And it seems like, like you'd mentioned earlier, obviously with Bruce and the E Street Band being like a family environment growing into that and playing in that. And that's what it feels like as a listener, with you and Slipknot. It just feels like you're like your new family. You know what I mean? It's just your new musical family. It fits really, really good. And just just from a creative standpoint, I mean, it's got to be so fucking rad as a drummer to have that canvas, to be just writing songs with those dudes and just being able to, like you're saying, you're in a spot where all you got to do is just fucking go for it. Just push yourself, jump all the way in and see what happens, and you got We Are Not Your Kind, comes out 2019. Awesome record. People fucking love that record. It's absolutely incredible. And then the Chapeltown Rag, was that from We Are Not Your Kind, or was that towards something new?
No, that's new. That's all new. Yeah. That's born out of our creative output this last year.
Hell yeah.
And really, because we had our momentum just cut completely short. We've got We Are Not Your Kind out, and we're on tour for not even like 5 months or something like that. We're all excited. We have all these great plans of how we want to play these new shows, and it's going awesome. The shows are great. And then all of a sudden you can't play any more shows. We're like,
yeah.
Fuck. So wanting to take that enthusiasm and that energy, you gotta, go back into isolation and get that out, So coming together with the idea of like, all right, we can't play shows, let's make this new stuff. And the Chapeltown Rag was born out of that. And to me, it's such an exciting song. We've played it now twice on stage, and to me, that's where songs really develop their legs. And I often think it's kind of ironic that you work really hard at making a song and recording it without without being informed of how you're going to play it on stage, which is really, to me, where it starts its life.
Yes.
It's incredibly backwards to me, because it's like, that's the freshest, the recorded version is the freshest that song is going to be. And then you start to put miles on it after the fact. It's interesting to me, but but now that we've played it on stage, I also find how it lives in that kind of environment as well. And it's amazing. And I'm very, very happy with that, very proud of that. I feel like it's probably my most, as far as my own like playing within it, that song is a good example of, just trying to throw myself into every single note and thinking about every single note and the meaning behind it and the intent. Like, you can listen to it on the surface and be like, what the fuck is this shit? It's, all over the place. It's totally crazy, chaotic. You can listen to it in that regard, and that's true. But it's also, that's the very end of a very long process of hashing out every single note, and me sitting next to, Joe Barresi talking about like, this one snare note is very important right here. like that's how deep, now that I'm in this process, and it's like I've learned, my process of applying myself within making a new Slipknot song happen, learning how to find those moments where I can be like, this is really important that I, make this musical choice or whatever.
Yeah. And
doing that for a song that ends up coming out totally crazy, like the Chapeltown Rag. But I can hear the intent in that. And that's what makes me appreciate, the creative process and what you can then, you're so like in it, you're so in the weeds with it, but then it kind of comes out like that. And you're like, wow, I'm so happy that we, made these decisions. And it did lead us down this crazy wormhole, but now we're playing this live together and it all makes so much sense. Like it's a, it's one song of our newest, creative adventure, but to me, it's a really rad way to show that character that I feel hasn't necessarily come out, not for any, intentional reason, that it hasn't been in, in certain elements of We Are Not Your Kind or The Gray Chapter, but the fact that it's coming out now is super exciting. And, I think that's because you just try to go deeper. You try to outperform yourself. It's not with anybody else's pressure of like, they gotta be better. They gotta do this. It's like, I want to be better for myself, for the people I'm collaborating with. I want to show that I'm better. And I think that that's a good mindset as you go into just embarking on new musical territories. If you can just bring your A game, you can make some stuff that you're really proud of.
Yeah, I agree, man. And that's awesome advice for younger musicians out there as well. And it's so cool to hear you to talk to you about your own evolution as an artist, as a drummer, and to hear it as well on the new recording. The song absolutely fucking shreds. And I totally agree with you about how backwards it is, like recording and then playing it live. Because even as like a singer, like you'll record a song and then you'll play it like a month or two, like in the row, and you're like singing in different spots. You're realizing there's a whole new, like almost like rhythm to the tune, and like a whole new life to it. And it's so funny to like realize, because then you put yourself in that weird mindset in the studio where you're like thinking about playing it live. Like, okay, when we do this live, what's the energy going to be like? Is it going to be the same? Is it going to be different? Is it going to be, anything, separate from what we already have here? And it's so weird, but that's like, that's what separates recorded music from live music. And that's why they're both great, but it does feel so backwards at times. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, I'll reflect on like when we started touring in support of The Gray Chapter, and we're playing a lot of songs on that album, 6 months after playing, one song, over and over and over again, I feel like, oh man, we're like better at playing this song than we were back when we recorded it. And, and we're very proud of the way we recorded it and presented it. And it's not to say that that's bad, like that version is now bad because we're better at it, but it's like putting it in a simple way of looking at it. It's like that recorded version is the worst version that it could be. You know what I mean? Like we got better at playing that song. You'd think logically, it's like now let's record the song. It's like, number one, we probably play that song a lot faster. But you're right. They are two different things. They coexist, but have these different qualities of it. But it is a fascinating thing of, you're like, man, I'm so much better at this song now. Can we go and remake what that was. It's very interesting to think about that way.
Yeah, man, it definitely is. Jay, I really appreciate your time. I don't want to take up too much more of it, but I do have to ask you about playing live with Slipknot, because it is absolutely insane to watch. And, we did one show with you guys in Mexico City, the one that you guys didn't even get to play because the barricade got ripped apart. The barricade got ripped apart. And, it just turned into like a whole nother classic, like rock and roll, just insanity. But, Slipknot fans, maggots worldwide, amazing, amazing fans. When you first put that mask on, like what was that like when you first got to play your first couple run of shows with the band? And, even like from my perspective as like a punk rocker, when you're involved in a stage setup of that magnitude, where you're pretty much like, I mean, at certain points, you're very far away from the other members of the band. you know what I mean? Like, does that kind of fuck with you, or is it all good because you got the ears and you're used to it by now? But what's the energy like on stage?
It's so, man, it really is hard to put into words, but I'll do my best. You really have to break it down into, or at least for myself, I had to break it down into bite-sized, manageable ways of looking at it, because it is so much to take in all at once. The more and more you do it, like anything, it becomes more and more second nature. It feels like a second skin almost. But yeah, I mean, I've got it right there. It's, that is a whole other element that of course I knew, and studied about the band, that this is a big element of the art and the presentation of, these thoughts and these emotions, and how you can characterize that in a myriad of different ways to express yourself. So I knew that about Slipknot and the approach, and I knew that was coming the whole year that we were, constructing this record. It's like, I know it's coming. I'm gonna be playing in a mask and in coveralls and stuff, and I'm gonna have to deal with that. But once it's in the moment of then, okay, we are on stage and we're playing every night. It really is about, taking the time to break it down into like, I just have to apply myself to what I can control here, my contribution to this. And as long as I'm playing in a way that, like, to me, it's always been, I want to play in a way that's responsible to the music, not just the history, but where we're going. And, for whatever reasons that I can't answer, these guys wanted to bring me into this fold. So I have to deliver on whatever that is. I just need to deliver myself 100% and on whatever's asked of me. So, applying myself to this mask and letting it become me in a way, and display my own personal character of the way I can best immerse myself in this music to get it to translate, and hope that translates to, our audience that, that has also a relationship with this music that's deep and defined. So it really is a matter of just kind of separating myself from it until I've done it enough where I understand it, because like a lot of things in the creative process and anything is like, you need to learn and have open eyes and open ears at every stage of it. So if I can abandon my preconceived notions about what it's like to do this, what it's like to play a show or make a new song or coexist, with my new bandmates, as long as I can kind of try to stay present in the moment and let my surroundings more so have input on how I'm dedicating myself to this, and just let that flow kind of through me, the more I can internalize, like, okay, this is the right way to approach this. This is my role within our bigger collective that makes it work, because we do have our strong suits that complement each other, that work together. And so coming into a band that has a history, it does take time to then figure out, okay, I'm here in between all these guys, and I need to learn how to make my puzzle piece fit and make sense. So that's a very, broad way of kind of looking at it, but that's kind of, in a way, really how I've looked at it until today, and it'll go on into the future of how I look at it is letting my surroundings and how I feel while playing a show, how we all feel while playing a show. If we get off stage and we're like, that was fucking awesome, that helps me hone in on the vision of like taking what I apply, because everything we do has a lot of intent and practice, and like nothing about it really is haphazard. Maybe experimentation while we're in the studio, it can be haphazard and accidental. But then once we hone our vision of like what we want to get across, it all has a lot of intent and purpose behind it. So, but you're constantly, because of how chaotic it is, you're constantly kind of swirling around that and hoping that your intent gets across the music in the way that you want it to get across. And so, it doesn't happen all the time, but we try our best, that's for sure, every night. And so when we hit it, and it's like a great example is we played our last show in LA, our second last show that we played. It was really exciting for us because we were going to debut a new song, the Chapeltown Rag. It was going to be live streamed. It was a Not Fest festival in a stadium. Very exciting for us. And each show has its own pressures, but that one kind of felt like it was coming up, like we're focusing on debuting new music and had a kind of weight to it. When we got off stage, we were like high-fiving that. It's like, that was fucking great. And then I use that in kind of my own little ongoing processing plant up here of like, that was awesome. I'm going to chase that feeling, and whatever I applied to that, if I can study it, if I can kind of break down how I was putting myself in that. And it couldn't, it doesn't just have to be that one show. Could have been a myriad of shows on that tour that I learn. And I feel like we all do. You learn what works, you learn what fits best, what feels best. And that's where you kind of create that like hive mind. And I'm sure you might have a similar experience with you guys, where you become part of something that's much bigger than the individual parts. The whole becomes this larger thing that you all kind of feed with love and care and attention to. So that's, and that's really just like survival, you gotta put your best foot forward and hope that translates, because we know what this music means to us. We know what it means to other people. And hopefully those things can come together every night. And so that's kind of, I've learned it's a big kind of concept to try to get, especially when I was like 23, first joining the band. But I feel like I've learned over the years that that's really like, my role and what I've come here to throw myself into. That's kind of how I can best conceptualize what I got to do day to day.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. It's really cool to hear that insight too, because it is, there's so much about concentrating on what you can control, and, you got your own instrument to worry about, but there is also the universal energy of the band as a band. And when both things can happen and you're in the audience and you can see someone like yourself just, smashing the fuck out of the drums, but you can hear everyone as a unit too, just like slamming together. Man, it's absolutely beautiful. It's so cool in a band like that, where you do have a lot of instrumentation going on and the music is very complex, and everything's happening, at lightning speed for the most part. But when you choose to like zone in on someone like yourself, or what Corey's doing, or what any of the guys are doing, Alessandro, anything, you can kind of pick in, like, see everyone kind of focused on what they're doing, but the band as a whole is just shredding. So it's awesome.
Thank you. And that's very important to us. I really appreciate hearing that. One thing that was a conversation, like not much of what we do musically is necessarily very conversational. It's a lot more like, we're on our instrument doing our thing. We try not to overthink things, because then when you do that, you fall into, your own brain processing. You can stumble over your own thoughts. So we don't talk about it much, but one conversation I had with Clown, when I first joined the band, was the thing we're focusing on is being a tight band.
Yeah.
You know, that to me, and that spoke to how I love music too. I love bands that are tight together. It's not about the individual. It's not about, it's about checking your ego once you get into the jam room, once you get onto that stage, and understanding your role within that and being tight, listening to each other, paying attention to each other. Our intent is not to be the fastest band. There's plenty of fast bands. It's not to be the loudest bands. There's plenty of loud bands louder than us. It's not about that. It's about doing, putting out what we, how we feel into constructing these songs. The song is always the most important thing, and how we're listening to each other and making our, what we put out there together as tight as can possibly be. And that's really important to me because, and it's not to knock any bands that, do things like play to, backing tracks or a click track to keep everybody on the same page or whatever. It's not to knock that at all, because that's valid and has its own merits and advantages and artistic way of doing things. But for us, it was important to me that it broke it down into like this punk rock approach that I've always taken to music, where we don't have any kind of tracks. We don't play to any kind of metronome. We do what we do, and we try to be tight because we're listening to each other, not because we're following a map that we've set out as a predetermined thing. It's because we're paying attention to each other, and there's a trust that you build with that. It only lives and breathes in that moment on stage, so when the music is being delivered, it doesn't matter, the age difference, because I'm the youngest guy in the band by a long shot. It doesn't matter, if I've been in the band for 8 years or if I've been in the band for 25 years. When we're on that stage, we're all channeling the exact same thing, listening to each other and being a tight band. And to me, once Clown indicated to me, it's like, that's our intent. That totally spoke to where my education came from with Bruce, of being a tight band. Same kind of thing. You're all listening to each other, and through that you create those magical moments that we all live for, and so once I got a hold of that, that's how I feel like you're able to really tap into the the magic, the special sauce of what you're trying to put out there, and I think it does translate that way.
I think it does too, man. It's such a beautiful thing to know that Slipknot is a real motherfucking band. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, goddamn, man. And you guys sound great. You're tight. Obviously, you got a lot of shows coming up this year. Any new music coming out this year? Any more, maybe a single or two? What's going on?
That's the hope, I tend to be of the mindset like it's the new music is going to be out when I can go to my local record store and I can hold the evidence in my hand.
Yeah.
So it's but no, that the intent is that we've been really hard at work over the last year.
Awesome.
Year and change. There's a lot of great positive things happening within the Slipknot world that we're all very proud of. And the Chapeltown Rag is one of those things. There are many more. With new shows, we're excited about displaying, at all times, we're excited to share what we've been up to. So hopefully we get to unveil some of those new things, in the very near future. And I'm confident that we will.
Hell yeah, Jay. I appreciate your time, my man. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Sailor Jerry podcast. It was awesome. We've been running around the same circles forever. And it was really cool to get to talk to you about music and about your life and creative process. So thank you very much, my man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah. That's a wrap on episode 29 of the Sailor Jerry podcast. As always, huge amounts of love and gratitude and thanks to our very special guest, the one and only Jay Weinberg of Slipknot, ladies and gentlemen. Jay, thank you very much for your time and for the conversation, my man. Really cool getting to talk to you. Excited to see Slipknot back out on the road this year. Be sure and get yourself a ticket. Don't miss the show. And you can follow Jay at Jay Weinberg on Instagram. You can follow Slipknot at Slipknot, of course. Follow at Sailor Jerry. Follow me at 213 Mattman. And don't forget, Sailor Jerry spiced rum, ladies and gentlemen. It's made the old school way. 92 proof, bold and smooth as hell. We'll see you in 14 days. Peace.